All right, Ben, so you've gone over what you'd eat in a week, what you'd eat in a day. You also do these periodic experiments with the carnivore diet. You've already mentioned your diet is basically carnivore most days of the week, but I want to hone in on this 90-day carnivore experiment you did about a year ago. You had blood work done at the beginning, in the end, so you have everything measured, which is just fantastic. Let's talk about what led up to that and then what that process was like for you, how your body handled it.
I love how well researched you are, my friend. Good job. You're a fantastic podcast host. Respect. It was about a year ago, actually. It was October of 2023. And I had been doing variations of carnivore as a reset since 2019. I'll do 30 days of carnivore, 45 days. Never did 90 straight days. And I never really did a whole bunch of lab work to kind of see some of the changes that would occur. One of the reasons why I wanted to do lab work is because so many people think that eating red meat and eating cholesterol and saturated fat will increase your risk of cancer and heart disease. And I know this is just one person doing one experiment, and my experiment could be different than somebody else doing the same experiment. But I wanted to show that I don't think this is the case. Research does not back this up, and I'm going to prove it just doing it on myself. So I decided, actually, I was going to do 30 days, Jesse, but I ended up doing 90. And right before I did the carnivore diet, I did a whole bunch of lab work. I did a $3,500 panel of blood work, a full lipid panel, particle sizes, HDL, LDL, particle sizes, triglycerides. I did my A1C, my fasting insulin, a full thyroid panel, full hormone panel, inflammatory markers. I did it all on day one. I also did a stool test on day one to look at my gut microbiome. I should back up a second and say, before this experiment, I was not doing what I'm doing now, where I'm primarily carnivore. I was probably doing keto 60% of the time and having a lot of vegetables. And I was not carnivore prior to this. Okay. So I want to let the audience know that's why it's important to state that. Now I am. But I did the experiment. So I did 90 days of carnivore, and the couple of interesting things happened. Let's start with the stool test. When I submitted the stool test on day one, I got the results back about 3 weeks into my carnivore experiment. And when I read the report, it looked at my gut diversity. And we know that the more diversity in your gut microbiome in general, the healthier you are. That's the name of the game, diversity. My diversity, when I tested on day one, came back as average. It was okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was average. And the lab report gave me some recommendations to increase my gut diversity. And on that report, Jesse, it said less keto, less red meat, more plants, more fiber, more polyphenols, essentially more of a plant-based diet. What did I do? The complete opposite. I was doing carnivore, and I was full on in carnivore already 3 weeks in, going for my 90 days. So you would think that by not listening to what the lab said and doing the complete opposite and eating no fiber, no carbs, no plants, no vegetables, no polyphenols, that when I retested on day 90, it's going to be a disaster. Well, I retested on day 90 right before I broke carnivore, got the results back. And here's the interesting thing. Everything in my gut microbiome improved. My diversity improved. Not just that. 7 core bacteria showed up on my day 90 test that did not show up on day one, and 5 keystone bacteria showed up on day 90 that was not there on day one, doing the complete opposite of what most people think you need to do to improve gut health. I didn't have any fiber, Jesse. I didn't have any plants. I just ate red meat. I ate poultry. I had eggs. I had goat cheese, all animal products for 90 straight days. So that was the gut report. You want to ask a question on that before I get to the labs?
Let's talk about that before we move on. I think this was the most interesting piece for me to see this change. What do you think it was? Again, no fiber. Everything that we conventionally view about the microbiome is being shattered by this. And in all fairness, we have to throw the fact that diversity is good into the mix as well, because this is shattering everything. Your diversity did get better, and by conventional terms, that is a good thing. But what we're learning from this experiment is that maybe, some of these assumptions we have aren't even true. So this just shatters everything and makes for an unsturdy foundation in a good way. It's time to look deeper at this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the chief scientific officer of this company that I did the lab test with was just surprised because I told him what I was doing. And he's like, I need to hop on a Zoom call with you to go over the results. And I did. And he was just blown away. He said it changed his whole perspective on how we view the gut microbiome. And this guy has spent 20 plus years in the space. I actually recorded that and published that in the video for the audience to watch. YouTube.com, just type in Ben Azadi Carnivore. It's the first video.
We'll link it up.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. And Dr. Pampa, who you had on your show, he kept asking me for months, did you get your results back? Do you get your results back? Because he was so interested in those gut microbiome results. And he was in Miami. We were recording some content together. He was coming over to my house, and he came over, and literally 5 minutes before he got here, the results came in. So we sat down in my office and recorded a short video, and I asked him why he thinks my diversity improved doing the complete opposite. And I agree with what his thoughts are. And here's what we think. We think the stress of removing all these plant toxins and fiber, the stress of being in continuous ketosis and just eating meat, it was a change to my gut microbiome, a stress that created diversity, more diversity. It forced the good bacteria to adapt and flourish. And then it created a scenario where the weak or bad bacteria did not survive. It kind of starved them out, right? So the change and the aggressive nature of this change and the stress, and this is a positive stress, we believe created this diversity in the gut microbiome. Now, I didn't stick with it. So I would hypothesize that if I did stick with this carnivore diet, strict continuous ketosis for 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, I would hypothesize, although I don't know this to be true, that I'd start to see the opposite results because then my body starts to adapt. And I think the change is the most important thing. It's the variation. This was a big change for my gut microbiome. So Jesse, I think that's what did it.
And have you had the same test done since? I'd be
No.
curious a year later, going back to, again, you mentioned your diet now is more carnivore, but what's happened with those different populations you've gained over that year?
Yeah, it's a good time to retest. Yeah. So here's what I'll do. When I come back on your podcast, I will have those results and we could go over the second results of that. The third results of them. Yeah.
Sounds good. And in theory, do we think the bacteria are feeding on the animal products? Or is it just a die-off and then a regrowth of the good guys? And an expansion, obviously, of new species too. But this might not be an area you're familiar with, but do you know if bacteria are feeding on animal products as well?
I think they're feeding off the butyrate from being in ketosis, right? The beta hydroxybutyrate, great for the gut. I don't know if they're necessarily feeding off like the animal protein. I'm not a gut microbiome specialist. It would be a good question for somebody who comes on your show. But the butyrate for sure, I know, great for the gut. And then the fact that my glucose levels and insulin levels were pretty stable. Like I know a lot of these bad bacteria feed off of high levels of sugar. Of course, Candida feeds off of high levels of sugar. And I was starving off a lot of these bad bacteria. So I think the butyrate played a big role there. And the fact that my sugars were so optimal that these bad bacteria didn't have a chance to flourish.
All right, let's get into some detail of what each day looked like. Was there coffee involved? I know you're a coffee drinker. You've mentioned that. Electrolytes, salt, other supplements?
I had coffee, so I did do it with coffee. I didn't want to give up the coffee, Jesse. I did give it up for 2 weeks throughout the entire experiment, but outside of that, I had coffee. Definitely kept my electrolytes and salt up because that's important. As you do ketosis or carnivore, what happens is you lower insulin, and your kidneys kind of go through this diuresis process where it sheds a lot of excess water weight along with electrolytes. So you could get into an electrolyte deficiency. So I was really intentional with having high quality electrolyte supplements or putting like sea salt in my coffee is another thing you can do as well. I did a lot of fasting. Naturally, as I ate more meat, I was just not hungry and actually was having a hard time getting enough protein because I was just so full and satiated. A lot of days I was doing, not a lot of days, but a few days I was doing one meal a day. I was just having one big meal. Just because I was so full and satiated. When you eat a lot of protein and fat, you just feel so full and satiated. Now, I didn't want to do that. I was just naturally so full. I ate a lot of red meat. That was like the main thing. Ground beef, ribeyes, New York strips with sea salt. I didn't add any other seasonings. I didn't do any carbohydrates. I didn't do any honey. I didn't do any fruit. It was strict carnivore for 90 days. And it was a challenge, Jesse, because it happened. I did it throughout the holidays. It was during Thanksgiving. It was during Christmas. And going back to that conversation earlier about the environment, like my family members did not like the fact that I was doing this. My mom did not understand it. They were making comments, but I have strong conviction and I knew I was doing this experiment. I wanted to make it accurate. But yeah, in terms of supplements, what else did I had? I had collagen. I had magnesium, melatonin, the same old usual stuff, but nothing that contained any plants or vegetables in it.
Well, let's go deeper into the specifics of the diet because there's carnivore and then there's a whole bunch of different subcategories under that, the top being just having beef and salt. And you do talk about this in the video, but get into specifics of what your diet was like and did it change at all over the 90 days?
Yeah, there are about 4 or 5 different layers or levels to carnivore, like you mentioned. The level 1, which is the most beneficial and the most extreme level, is what you said, the red meat and the salt. That's it, beef and salt. Beef tallow, and salt. That's more reserved for people that have autoimmune conditions, severe autoimmune conditions. It's really restrictive, but really powerful. Level 2, a little bit more flexibility where you have beef, salt, and beef tallow, but then all animal products, including poultry, bison, lamb, like you open it up to all animal products and even seafood. Level 3 is everything I mentioned, plus eggs and dairy. Now, personally, I prefer sheep and goat dairy than cow dairy. So I did more of a level 3 where I had all animal products, eggs, seafood, and sheep and goat dairy. I did that for the majority of my 90 days. Then there's a level 4 carnivore, which is the most flexible one, where you have everything I mentioned, plus avocados, mushrooms, like Dr. Paul Saladino does fruit. He's animal based. That's more flexible. That's more for somebody who doesn't have autoimmune, has a healthy metabolism, and you kind of just want to be animal based in that variation. So for me, I did more of a level 3 where I had all different animal products, seafood, eggs, sheep, and goat dairy. There were some days where it was level 1, where it was just beef and salt. But for the most part, it was more of a level 3, all animal products.
And would you say your diet day in, day out now after the experiment, is that more of a level 4?
More of a level 3, Monday through Saturday is more of a level 3. Yeah, I'm doing seafood, dairy, eggs, so more of a level 3.
And are you a stickler for quality? Organic, grass-fed, grass-finished? How do you look at that and incorporate those into your diet?
I prefer to get grass-fed, grass-finished, organic. I want to support that type of farming first and foremost, and it's just healthier for you. Now, when I go to restaurants, can't always find that. The safest bet at a restaurant, by the way, this is a good tip for your audience, is lamb, because lamb is always grass-fed. So even if you're at a restaurant and there's a steak and a lamb shank or a lamb chops, always go with the lamb. The worst option at a restaurant, if it's not organic, is chicken and pork. Those are the dirtiest animals out there. High omega-6 content, high levels of linoleic acid, which is the vegetable oil we spoke about earlier. That's the worst option if you cannot find organic. So if nothing's organic, the best option is lamb, because that's always grass-fed. But yeah, to answer your question, when I order my foods, my meats, it's grass-fed, grass-finished. But when I go to restaurants, I'll just get a piece of steak, even if it's not grass-fed, grass-finished, or organic.
Right. And to further elaborate on what you mentioned there, that's the way I understand it as well, where ruminant animals, you're better off with those if you're going conventional. And then the omega-6s skyrocket in things like pork and chicken when they're conventional. So just highlighting that.
That's exactly right. So if you're going to go conventional, avoid chicken and pork. Stick with lamb as your best option. Second best option is cow's beef.
All right, let's come back to your experiment here. We went over the microbiome piece. Things improved in that realm. Let's move into other things. Body fat percentage, HRV, other things you tested.
Yeah, so I had the Oura Ring on the whole time. And I looked at my sleep scores, my heart rate variability. Then I also tested my body fat with an in-body electroimpedance scale. Not the most accurate, but it gave me some data. My body, I've dropped 6% body fat, meaning a total of 6% body fat reduction during the 90 days. And I didn't even realize that I needed to lose those 6% body fat, but my body did it. So I got really lean. My abs got more defined. I forget the amount of weight I lost.
16 pounds.
Oh, there you go, Jesse. There you go. I lost 16 pounds in the 90 days as well. So 6% body fat, 16 pounds. Thank you, Jesse. My heart rate variability improved dramatically. And that's a really important marker. It's one of my favorite markers to track is heart rate variability. Essentially, heart rate variability is giving you an idea of how healthy your nervous system is. We know that we have two branches to the nervous system. We have the sympathetic branch, fight, flight, cortisol, really important in short spurts. Then we have the parasympathetic branch, rest, digest, detoxification, elimination. With a low heart rate variability, it's showing that you are parasympathetically suppressed and sympathetic dominant, meaning you're too stressed out. So in general, you want to raise your heart rate variability. By doing so, you could actually do more biohacks. You could actually do more of the stressors that benefit your body. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit later. So I looked at my heart rate variability and it was already good and it had been improving over the years. But with Carnivore, it bumped up. It bumped up on average. It kept going up and the baseline was pretty good and it kept going back up. So overall, my HRV improved. My deep sleep improved. I got more deep sleep each night. I got more REM sleep, which is more for rapid eye movement sleep, more for memory processing, short-term memory to long-term memory. I was waking up less times throughout the night. I have sleep apnea from eating a poor diet my whole life. My teeth got crowded. I had a narrow mouth. Last 4 years, I've been wearing an expander. My face looks completely different. The teeth are getting straight, but I still have mild sleep apnea. So I look at that Oura ring and it shows you that white little bar when you wake up, and that happens throughout the night. And less of that was happening with Carnivore. And I'm determined to completely reverse my sleep apnea as I fix my dental stuff. So my sleep improved, woke up less times throughout the night. Overall, Jesse, I just had amazing energy levels. Of course, I was in ketosis. And I think a lot of people don't understand that Carnivore is keto, okay? Because you're in ketosis when you do Carnivore. Keto is a metabolic process. So people think, I don't like keto anymore. I like Carnivore. Well, you're in ketosis when you're doing Carnivore. I have news for people who say that. So I felt good. My brain function was great. I was playing basketball. I was working out. I was strength training. I was recovering well. Man, I just felt overall great with Carnivore. My body responds really well to Carnivore.
A previous guest of the show, Bart K, mentioned that to get out of ketosis on a carnivore diet, you'd want to have a big bolus of food at one time, and that would trigger leaving ketosis, which he looked at as being a good thing. How do you look at that, or do you feel that's true?
Yeah, that can happen. Bart is correct, right? So he's referring to gluconeogenesis. I imagine, I don't know if he mentioned this, but he's probably referring to gluconeogenesis from the extra protein. Is that correct? Do you remember that?
To be honest, it's been a bit. I didn't know if it was, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, I doubt it was the caloric surplus, because even if you increase your fat, like even in a caloric surplus, that won't bump you out of ketosis. And then you're not doing it with carbs. So the only thing is the protein. And when you eat a lot of protein, when you eat a lot of protein all at once, some of that protein is converted into glucose via gluconeogenesis, and it could bump you out of ketosis. And I don't think that's a bad thing. To his point, I agree. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, Jesse, when I used to teach keto, one of the things I used to teach is to eat moderate to low protein, because I was worried that this gluconeogenesis could kick you out of ketosis. And at this time, I didn't want that to happen for people. I wanted them to stay in ketosis. But I discovered through testing a lot of people and also my own research and testing on myself that it's really difficult to do that. For example, if you had 100 grams of protein in one meal, which I could easily do, about 60 grams, 60% of those grams will be converted into sugar via gluconeogenesis. So you would think, yeah, that's enough to bump you out of ketosis, 60 grams of carbs or sugar. However, if you're already going into that meal in a ketogenic state or a fasted state, your glycogen stores are very low or depleted, which is your sugar reserves in your muscle and liver cells. So the excess glucose just replenishes the glycogen stores, doesn't necessarily raise your blood sugar levels enough to bump ketones down. So you can do that. Bart is correct if you have enough protein all at once to create the gluconeogenesis, but it's really difficult to do. You know, Jesse, 2 weeks ago, I was in Tampa for Dr. Pompa's conference. He had a conference where they live streamed it from a studio in Tampa. And I drove up because I was speaking there. And I was having dinner with Pompa and his son, Simon. And we got into this debate about protein. Like his son, Simon, just likes to get under people's skin in a fun way. And he was just making fun of me because at the steakhouse, I had a piece of a 22-ounce ribeye. And then one of our friends, Andrea, didn't finish her steak. So I had half of her steak. And he was like, oh my gosh, you're having that much protein, gluconeogenesis, it's bad for your kidneys. And they were like having fun about it, right? And Pampa was joining in on this. And we got into this debate about protein. He was saying Simon was saying protein can make you fat, protein can cause a blood sugar spike. But we came to the conclusion that it's really difficult to overeat protein. It's so filling and satiating that it's hard to do that, Jesse. Even 100 grams is hard to do for most people. So yeah, can you bump yourself out of ketosis on carnivore by eating enough protein? You can, but it's not as common as you think.
All right, let's come back to HRV. You got into what that is, but what about on a day you wake up, you look at your Oura ring on your phone, your results, you see that it's low. What would you do to take care of yourself or to put yourself in a better position throughout the day?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question. It all boils down to hormesis, right? And I think a lot of people in our space have heard the word hormesis, but they don't really understand it, right? Every biohack that we do is a stress. It's a positive stress. When your body adapts to, you get stronger. That is staying in this hermetic zone. For example, red light therapy, sauna, cold plunge, fasting, ketosis, carnivore, exercise, PEMF mats. These are all stressors to your body. Are they bad? No. If you do too much and don't adapt, then it becomes bad. You drop out of this hormetic curve. So hormesis essentially means a stress that you apply, you adapt to the stress, and you get stronger. Going back to HRV. Heart rate variability lets you understand if you're adapting to the stressor. So if I woke up this morning and my HRV was below baseline, then today would be a day where I do not apply too many stressors. It might be a day where I don't do much fasting, I do more feasting, I don't do my fasted workout, or if I do, I take it easy. It's a day where I take the foot off the pedal just a little bit. If I see my HRV at baseline or above, I'm going to push myself. This is a good day to do my cold plunge, to do my infrared sauna. So I did my infrared sauna today. I did my fasted workout today. I got the sunshine today because it was a good HRV day for me. So it's a good gauge. The higher HRV, the more fasting you can do, the more of these biohacks you can do. The lower your HRV, you have no business doing all these biohacks. I mean, you ask the average person who teaches people how to cold plunge, and they're all over the place. A beginner goes to a cold plunge coach and asks them, it's my first time. How long should I go? Oh, 3 minutes. Wrong answer. All right. That is too much of a stress for that beginner to do. They might need to do 2 seconds or 10 seconds, adapt to the stress and kind of go from there. So hormesis is the name of the game. You want to stay in this hermetic zone. When you stay in this zone, that's where you thrive. And I could unpack that more if you want. But yeah, that's how I view my HRV, Jesse.
All right. So you mentioned it from taking your foot off the gas if you notice it's low. Things you'll do when you have a higher HRV to get the hormetic benefit. But on a day that it's low, other than taking your foot off the gas, are there things you can do that day, like having an Epsom salt bath, taking time to meditate, things you'll do to give yourself extra self-care, for lack of a better word, to bring that back up?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. Yes, oxytocin. Anything you can do to raise the hormone, the love hormone, oxytocin will help you get that HRV back up. Oxytocin has an inverted relationship to the stress hormone cortisol. So all of those things you mentioned, Jesse, elicits an oxytocin response, an Epsom salt bath, a meditation, a favorite hobby that you enjoy doing, whether that's like coloring or a game that you play with a partner, petting your dog, you get an oxytocin release. Walking out in nature, you get an oxytocin release. The best way to get an oxytocin release and raise your heart rate variability and lower inflammation and extend your lifespan is to take vitamin G. Because when you take vitamin G, you get all those benefits in a matter of seconds. Vitamin G has been studied And Dr. Joe Dispenza has studied vitamin G. He's taken people through vitamin G workshops where they would take vitamin G twice a day for 4 or 5 days. He would measure their cortisol levels. He would measure their immune system via the IgA measurement, which is protective for the immune system. And he saw after taking vitamin G for just a few days, cortisol levels dropped, their immune system built up in just a matter of days. He also has seen 1,200 chemical processes take place instantaneously in the brain, in the body, when you take vitamin G, oxytocin, GABA, dopamine, serotonin, all these feel-good chemicals and hormones. Studies show those who take vitamin G live longer than those who don't take vitamin G. Vitamin G lowers blood pressure, lowers blood sugar levels. So I know your audience is thinking, man, I'm going to go to the show notes and look for this vitamin G coupon code. Where can I get it? Well, vitamin G is the practice of gratitude. You can see it on my shirt. We talked about it before we hit record. It is the feeling of gratitude. And all those studies were on gratitude. It's not woo-woo. This is scientifically proven. When you practice gratitude, it's the quickest way to raise oxytocin in your body, to raise heart rate variability, to put your body in a parasympathetic state. But I would caution that vitamin G, gratitude, is not an intellectual practice. It is an emotional practice. It's not about a checklist of I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for this. No, it is the feeling of gratitude. So instead of writing down 10 things you're grateful for, I would prefer if you chose 1 or 2 things or 2 people that you're grateful for and spend a whole minute on why you're grateful for that person. So Jesse, yeah, oxytocin is what you want to do on those days where your HRV is low.
Before we leave this piece, because you are an expert and do focus a lot on this, given your t-shirt there, and I just know this is a big thing for you, I want to make sure practically we can really translate this for people. And you got into it a bit there with don't just write it down, but feel it. But get into more of what you mean by that and how often you'll do that throughout the day. Yeah, more specific so people can really leave this having this as a tool on their tool belt.
Love it. In the book, Metabolic Freedom, I have vitamin G dosage, and I'm going to give that to your audience right now. Your audience gets the first sneak peek on that vitamin G dosage, the best way to get the vitamin G.
Nice.
It's a 3-minute routine. You do it in the morning, once a day. That's it. And the reason you do it in the morning is because that's when your subconscious mind is most impressionable, most influential. And the subconscious mind runs the show. We spoke about it a little bit earlier. So by doing it in the morning, you're going to get the most results. Do it before you look at your phone, before you start your day. And what you want to do in this 3 minutes, you want to spend 1 minute on a relationship, a memory, a moment, a thing you're grateful for. And you want to bring as many emotions and feelings into that relationship, thing, or person for that 1 minute, right? And if you have trouble doing that, because some people do, Jesse, I have this question sometimes. I have trouble feeling the gratitude. Like, what can I do? Imagine that person being taken away from you. Imagine that situation. Imagine your right arm being taken away from you. You're going to have gratitude for that right arm, right? So if you could imagine something being taken away, then you have more of appreciation for it if you struggle with it. But spend a minute on that person, and then move on to the next thing. You want to find 3 different things. Memories, people, things in your life. Spend a minute on each, bring in as much emotion. So 3 minutes, that's your vitamin G dosage. You do that every single morning, and here's what's going to happen. You rewire your entire brain. There's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. It's the size of your pinky right here in your brainstem. This is what God put in your brain as a selective seeking mechanism to filter out all of the stimulation that we get. There are millions of things that the brain needs to filter out every day. If we didn't have a mechanism in place like the RAS to filter out everything, the brain would short circuit. We would not be able to focus and stay alert and stay alive during the years where we had to find our predator, or run away from our predator, or find our prey. So this RAS is trained. We've trained this software system in the brain to see what we've taught it to see. I'll give you an example. I'm in the process of buying a new car, and it's an Audi. It's let's just say it's a red Audi, although it's not, but red is a good example. And I've been on autotrader.com, going to dealerships. I've been putting a lot of energy and bandwidth and research into a red Audi. for a few weeks now, and I haven't bought it yet, but I've been putting a lot of energy into this. So now I've noticed, Jesse, when I'm driving around the streets of Miami, there are these red Audis popping up all over the place. I'm at a stop sign and the car driving across from me is a red Audi. I'm on the highway and the car right next to me is a red Audi. And I'm thinking, man, I never noticed these red Audis before, but now they're everywhere. Why is that? Well, because I've trained my RAS to now see it. All right. How does that work with gratitude? The more we appreciate things, the more it appreciates. Universal law, what you feed energy to expands. So the more you have gratitude for something, the more gratitude you're given. The opposite is true. When you're not grateful, when you're resentful, when you're angry, you've trained your RAS to see all these problems, and all you get are these problems. All you get are these situations that make you angry. And when you switch over to getting that vitamin G every single morning, now all of a sudden, all the problems you had are now opportunities. All the obstacles are now opportunities. All the stressings are now blessings. And you retrained that RAS to see the gratitude in everything. And there's always something to be grateful for. This doesn't happen overnight, but I promise you, as you get your vitamin G every morning, week after week, month after month, you're going to be a grateful person. You're going to be talking about vitamin G to your friends. You're going to be sharing it with them. It'll change your life. You know, I was walking my dog the other day and I thought, man, gratitude is strength training for the soul. It's the quickest way to strengthen the soul, strengthen the heart. And I believe it's the missing piece for a lot of people looking to get healthy.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Early in the conversation, we talked about affirmations, and I wanted to come back to that. And I think this is a good piece in the conversation to bring it back in. In a practical sense, how does somebody do that? Time a day, what exactly does that look like? And for you, does that fit in alongside the gratitude piece? Is this something you do around the same time, or how, just basically, how do you fit this into your day?
Yeah, I mean, you can. For me, the affirmation thing, I keep, it's an affirmation card, and you could actually just get a simple index card and write down, and I like writing it down in the present tense. I'm so happy and grateful now that, and write down your goal. One of the things I wrote in the book is, I'm so happy and grateful now that I have achieved my goal weight. The perfect health I seek is now seeking me. That's the affirmation I gave in the book. So you would write that down, or whatever affirmation you want, and you would keep it with you in your pocket. And you would just pull it out and read it throughout the day. Read it as many times as possible. The more focus and feelings and intention you put into reading it, the faster it's going to manifest for you. So the affirmation you would have on a card, and just read that as often as possible. When you go to the bathroom, pull it out, read it. I just keep it with me. It just changes your brain. The gratitude piece, you simply need to do it in the morning when you wake up. 3 minutes, 1 minute each gratitude moment. Now, the more you do of it, the better, right? That's always a good thing. But you could tie in the affirmation part right after the gratitude as well, if you want. But with the affirmation, I like having that with me throughout the day. Keep it in your pocket. And every time you just pull it out of your pocket, you read it, put it back. Every time you feel it in your pocket, you read it. And the more you do that, and the more focus you put on that, the more you take this idea, this desire, this want of what you want to achieve, because wants and desires are in the conscious mind. Your expectations, your self-image is in the subconscious mind. As soon as you take that want and desire from the conscious mind to the subconscious mind through affirmations, it manifests for you. You don't sabotage yourself. You find ways to make it happen. You crush your goals. And you could do this not just for health, you could do it for everything in your life. These affirmations I have on here for myself are not health related personally. They're actually business related goals. And I got to tell you, man, it's been crazy. I've been doing this for years, and every single time the goal is achieved. And these are goals that are just crazy goals, but I've done the work, and I really believe in this, Jesse. So the affirmation card, carry it with you. The gratitude, do it every morning.
Can you give us an example of one you had in the past that you achieved?
Yeah. So, for example, you could relate like the YouTube, the silver plaque, right? Like that was a goal I had, right? I'm so happy and grateful now that I have over 100,000 subscribers on my Keto Kamp YouTube channel. Like when I wrote that, man, I had just started my YouTube channel. Like it was just so far out there, right? Now, I don't know if you saw my phone earlier when I shared the little screenshot. Like I have this is photoshopped. I have the gold YouTube plaque and it says, congratulations for Keto Kamp, 1 million subscribers. Like, this hasn't happened yet, right? This is a Photoshop photo, but I keep it in front of me and I have that as my goal car, right? And that's going to be the next thing I achieve. So I'm telling you, it works really well when you do it consistently.
I did see that earlier, and I thought that might be what it was. So very cool.
Yes. Yeah.
So how many at a time, and how often are you changing them?
I would start with one at a time. I have two personally, but I've been doing this for a while. I would start with one, the most important thing. And now, if it's health related, start with the health thing. And you would I didn't mention this, so I'm glad you asked that question. You would put a date at the top of when you want to achieve this, and you're just guessing. So just put a date and be bold on that date. And if you get to that date and you haven't achieved it, which has happened to me, you just change the date again. But you have the date and you keep reading it until you achieve the goal. And then you add a different goal and have a different affirmation. That's the way I would do it.
All right. I want to come back to the experiment. 90 days, you basically gave the gut microbiome a break in a way by narrowing down your diet. Diversity increased. It got healthier. Now that you're back on more of a quote unquote normal diet, how do you look at the microbiome? Are you including fermented foods, probiotics, fiber? I'm assuming not the latter, but how do you look at the microbiome as a whole? And are you doing anything to establish that in a healthy way?
I still don't understand the gut microbiome, to be honest with you. I just feel like we're just in like the early stages of really understanding it. But I like the idea of retesting, like you mentioned, and seeing what's happening now with this new change. I love fermented foods. I think fermented foods are great. These prebiotic foods, Feed the Good Guys, big fan of it. Now, if you have histamine issues and you're histamine intolerant, you want to go really slow with fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and kefir. But I like them and I have them from time to time. I do have fiber when I have those, but outside of that, I'm not really having fiber, with the exception of that flex day, because I'm having fruit, I'm having carbs, I'm having my favorite masa corn tortilla chips, which is seed oil free beef tallow, which is fiber, and that's usually what I have on a flex day. But my idea around the gut microbiome, I still believe that stressing it is beneficial through dietary changes, through fasting, through sauna, through cold exposure. I think stressing the gut microbiome is beneficial. I've seen that to be the case for myself. I've seen that with other people. But I don't know. Like, some people could eat fiber and they're going to increase their gut microbiome diversity. They're going to see improvements. Some people do the complete opposite. Me, they improve their gut microbiome. I don't know, Jesse. Like, where do you stand with the gut microbiome? Because you've interviewed a lot of people, and to me, I'm still kind of confused about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an area of interest, and I definitely talk to a lot of people about it, but I don't have it figured out by any means.
Me too.
And
man.
my
I'm there with you.
perspective on a lot of things in this realm continues to change. So, yeah, I'm just continuing to, read about it and ask my guests about it and learn, but a lot to learn in that realm.
Unlearn and relearn. That's the space we're in right there.
Exactly. So for you, a lot of good things happened during the 90 days. Any negatives?
Well, any negatives? Yeah, I mean, I guess having Thanksgiving with your family and friends and not being able to eat all the amazing food was kind of a challenge and a negative. Same thing for Christmas dinner. I had 2 Christmas dinners and I had to eat only meat. I chose to only eat meat. That was a little challenging. Socially, it's challenging for sure. You go to dinner parties, you get invited to things, and you're only doing carnivore. It's people don't understand it. It can be challenging socially. So that is a negative for sure. But I did it and I was committed to doing it. And you could do it too if you commit to it as well. Other than that, yes, another thing. I had diarrhea. A few times. And that can happen. I've seen that happen for a lot of people actually, especially in the beginning. So you might get diarrhea the first week as your gut microbiome is adapting. Adding in some ox bile supplementation could help with that. Usually I would say add in bitter-rich foods, but that's not carnivore. Apple cider vinegar could help with that. And I would add that to a carnivore approach. I think that's fine. So I did have some diarrhea, some loose stools the first couple weeks. Another negative would be basketball. In the beginning, Every Sunday, I play basketball at the park in Miami Beach with some friends outdoors, fasted 2 hours outside. It's hot in Miami. First couple of weeks doing that with Carnivore, I would bonk, I would hit a wall, and I would not have that burst that I had before Carnivore. So that was kind of negative. I discovered that taking exogenous ketones before basketball, even during Carnivore, really helped with that. And then as my body adapted to Carnivore, I had no issues. Outside of that, Jesse, no, everything else was positive, and I could talk about the labs as well if you want.
Well, one lab I definitely want to get into is LDL. I
Yes.
know that skyrocketed. From hearing you talk, I know that's not a concern for you and a lot of other people in our world. But talk about what you saw there and how you look at that.
Yeah, LDL was one of the markers I took. I took total LDL, and I did the NMR profile, which looks at the LDL particle sizes. So most conventional doctors and cardiologists believe that high LDL is a contributing factor to heart disease. That's usually the way most people think. And the first thought is like, we have to lower the LDL. We got to get you on a statin. So my LDL on day one, I believe, was around 250 on day one, which was still pretty high because I was still doing more of a keto saturated fat approach. So it was still high. On day 90, it went up to 350. Super high. Oh my gosh. However, I did the LDL particle sizes, which is very important to do because total LDL, just like total cholesterol, is kind of meaningless. It doesn't give you enough data. So the particle sizes looks at two patterns of your LDL particles. Pattern A, which is good, large, fluffy, goes right through the arteries, supports the immune system. It's been linked to actually longevity. Then we have the pattern B, B as in bad, which is the small sticky particles that could get lodged into your arterial wall, creating damage to your blood vessels, contributing to heart disease. So when I did the particle sizes on day one and on day 90, most of my particle sizes were the pattern A, large and fluffy, the majority of them, almost 90% plus, which means although I had high LDL, the majority was the good kind of LDL. The small sticky was really low, and it got even lower on day 90 of Carnivore. And I interviewed, and I had Dr. Philip Ovadia review the results, who's a heart surgeon. And he said essentially on day one, you were at low risk of heart disease. On day 90 of Carnivore, your risk dropped even more for heart disease. So, man, and all my inflammatory markers improved. But yeah, the LDL piece, you show that to any doctor, they would freak out, right?
And we know that you didn't retake your microbiome test since. Have you redone the blood work since?
No, I'm due for that. I'll do both, actually.
Okay. I'm curious on the LDL piece. Again, not out of concern, but just when you introduce more carbs, likely that's going to come back down.
I think it'll drop.
I think so.
I think so too.
Any other noteworthy results that you want to share?
One of the markers that I tested for was high sensitivity C-reactive protein. It's an inflammatory marker. And on the actual report, it actually shows that this test is an assessment for a future cardiovascular event, meaning heart attack, stroke, heart disease. It's a really important metric that cardiologists look at to see if you're at risk of heart disease. My C-reactive protein was under 0.5 on day one, really good, really optimal. And on day 90, it was still under 0.5, right? So just looking at that, you could kind of show a cardiologist, like I ate nothing but saturated fat and cholesterol, and it didn't change my C-reactive protein. I think it went up just a little bit, but it was still optimal on day 90. So that right there was important. My fasting insulin was 3.3 on day one, 3.2 on day 90. Again, a really important metric. My A1C dropped a point. It was already optimal, and it got even better. Everything improved. And, I have the full report on my YouTube channel for anybody to go see it too.
Yeah, and again, we're going to link that up in the show notes. So the obvious question, and we've gotten a bit of a taste for, I think, where you're going to go with your answer because of your Sunday changing your diet up thing. Why not stick on this diet long term? Things turned out great. Obviously, there's a social aspect. And then again, adding on the fact that you do believe from early in the conversation, there is a benefit to changing things up on Sunday. Did you consider just continuing the diet long term?
I didn't consider it, but I did change my routine Because before that experiment, I was not doing what I'm doing now, where I'm carnivore Monday through Saturday, not carnivore Sunday. It convinced me to do that sort of variation. But there's a couple of reasons why I don't want to do it long term. And I could be wrong here, but I've worked, as I mentioned, with over 5,000 people, taking them through a keto process. And every single one of them that stuck with ketosis long term, we saw some negative things happen, right? For men, we saw their testosterone drop. For women, we saw thyroid issues. And then for both, we saw weight loss stalls and even weight rebound. We saw cortisol issues. We saw adrenal issues. That's because, and I know we have mutual friends that I love and respect, Ken Berry and Dr. Sean O'Mara, and guys that I love and share stages with. They will disagree with what I'm about to say, but that's because ketosis and carnivore is a stress to the body. Short term, great. You're in that zone of hormesis. Long term, you fall out of that zone, I believe, and then bad things start to happen. That's one reason why I don't want to do it long term. The second reason is because I believe in metabolic flexibility. That is the ultimate goal for me, and I think for everybody I want to teach, is metabolic flexibility. That is having a metabolism that is able to use any substrate that is available, whether it's sugar or fat, glucose or ketones. To me, there are two types of metabolic inflexibility. For the majority of people, that variation is only burning sugar. You're metabolically inflexible because you're stuck burning sugar. For the people that are long-term ketosis and long-term carnivore, it's another variation because you're stuck only burning fat. You forgot how to burn sugar. I never want to be in any of those camps. I want to be able to burn sugar when I want, enjoy myself with healthy carbs, and use it eat it at social occasions, and then go right back to burning fat and ketosis, doing carnivore. So for me, this is more sustainable, and I prefer this approach to more of a long-term keto or carnivore approach.
So far throughout the conversation, you've changed your mind on a few things over the years. One being not staying in ketosis long term. Two being prioritizing protein. Three is now you're more of a carnivore-ish diet after this experiment we've been talking about. Any other major changes since you've come into this keto world that you've changed your mind on?
Yes, good job. Great breakdown of what I changed my mind on. I even forgot. Well done. I would say, yeah, vegetables. I used to be big on a green leafy vegetable, ketogenic approach, spinach, kale, almonds. Oh my gosh, that's a big one that I changed my mind on. Almonds. I am not a fan of almonds personally, and I tell all my students to avoid almonds. And that's because of the anti-nutrients, the oxalates, the phytates, the lectins. 4 or 5 years ago, I was not aware of how bad they are for you. And I would promote a very vegetable, green leafy vegetable oriented ketogenic approach. Now, my focus is more on a low oxalate sort of ketogenic approach. So not necessarily carnivore, but eating more arugula, broccoli, Brussels sprouts versus kale, spinach. And in terms of nuts and seeds, I do not recommend almonds anymore. They are loaded with anti-nutrients as well. For me, Jesse, I was eating so many almonds, and a lot of these keto breads and keto pizzas are loaded with almond flour, that I was getting these styes in my eye. Oh my gosh. Have you ever gotten a sty, Jesse?
No.
They suck.
I know of them, but I've never had one, thankfully.
They're so painful and they're ugly. Your eye swells up. And this kept happening to me. And I kept wondering why. And it was my body's way. My body was trying to get rid of these oxalates by shoving it out through a sty. And it was because of the amount of almonds that I was eating. So once I stopped eating almonds and switched over to more low oxalate vegetables, haven't gotten a sty since. So that's one thing I changed my mind on. I'm not a big fan of almonds anymore.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
I did the experiment. So I did 90 days of carnivore, and a couple of interesting things happened. I dropped 6% body fat, meaning a total of 6% body fat reduction during the 90 days. And I didn't even realize that I needed to lose those 6% body fat for my body.